call this meeting to order. Regular meeting, St. John Hudson USD 350. Welcome to all our visitors. Dr. Heim.
Rock and Bob.
Jill. And Mike, all of a sudden, and the camera lady. Welcome this evening. Additions or changes to the agenda?
I asked that we adjust the agenda a little bit here in the interest of not getting Dr. Heim out dodging deer too late tonight. If we can move item 3 to be ahead of item 1 and 2, and then we would also do executive session immediately following that, and then we resume the agenda in ways written with those items that were in.
Mr. President, I move if we accept the corrections to the agenda as stated.
Second. When you move in a second to approve the agenda as amended and stated. Use the correct term there, Barb.
No, I just about poured a coffee in.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign, 7-0. Approval of the consent agenda, which is the minutes from the last meeting on November the 14th. The financial statements and warrants.
You should have check registers at your place.
What are shooting the shirts?
Those are, coaches order those, kids who wear them in warm-up. It's not their windsuit that they wear, but like when they're going out warming up before the game starts, sometimes they've had camouflage color shirts, black shirts, or blue shirts. They usually are personalized for the kid.
What about a camera and a DVR? Did you guys talk about that in the meeting in the midst or something? We install a camera and a DVR.
Yeah, we purchased a DVR to go with the camera. That will allow us then, at some point, if we want to expand security measures in the building, we can add other cameras like entrances and things like that. That gives us a little more flexibility with that camera that we have, and we'll make it accessible over the internet in case we want to check things remotely.
Or that camera,
Which camera?
the one that she's talking about.
It's still there, up in the roof of the gym. I'm not tracking it yet.
Well, it says install camera and.
Right. I don't know if it was worded that way,
Well,
just because of how, they had to run some different wire or something like that. But it's that system that we have that we put a DVR with it.
So is it wired for expansion now?
Yeah, we could actually add other cameras on if we wanted to.
How many up to
We could add up to 3 more.
At the entrances or something?
Or any place else that we felt like if we were starting to have security issues. So,
what'd you say is that in the gym?
the DVR actually sits on a cabinet in the high school office. The camera is the one that's in the gym that is the live feed for the TVs in the cafeteria that we had in there last year.
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Do you
Second.
put,
To approve the consent agenda, is there any discussion? Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. Patron comments. All right, our first item this evening will be superintendent search discussion with Dr. Max Heim. Turn it over.
Yes, Dr. Heim, I think you remember him, he's been here and worked with the board previously on the superintendent search. Part of what he does is he came out this afternoon early and met with some of the staff who wanted to come out, along with a community member, just to share thoughts that they have about characteristics to look for in a superintendent candidate. I think he posed some questions to them and gets responses. I think his intent is to do that with the board as well this evening, and then also I think to share at your place the comments that received earlier. And I'm going to excuse myself to the room down the hall here, just so I don't inhibit conversation, so the board feels free to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about regarding that, and then I'll return when we complete with that item. We'll do the executive session at that time.
Are we ready?
You got the floor, Dr. Hyde.
Okay, well, you have in front of you what we discovered this afternoon. Julianne was good enough to take notes, and we basically have about 4 items that we ask. And one of them is describe the most important leadership and personal qualities that you would like to see in a new superintendent. And we had about, Julianne, about 10, 15 faculty members.
Closer to 10.
Yeah, yeah. And we had one brave patron. 5:30 is not a good time, but there's no other time. You know, when we do these, I do these all the time. And then it was cold, but it's also dinner hour and a lot of things, so it makes it a problem. But one lady came and it was good, and we had a good discussion. But you can see, and you of course get to keep these and consider them. But under the leadership and personal qualities, the visible, and be able to make decisions and not be wishy-washy, a good communicator and a listener, both with staff and community. These are all really good comments. There weren't any negative comments at all. And I don't like to hear them, but I don't discourage them if they don't say them, and there weren't any. Willing to learn about the district before implementing change. That's always an issue with a new superintendent. And it's always a problem for a new superintendent. If one comes in and immediately makes a bunch of changes or says, you know, where I used to work, we did this. It causes trouble. And if you wait too long, they'll say, well, isn't this guy ever going to do anything, kind of a thing? So finding that is a skill. Instructional and technology leader, one of good moral character, follow through, you know, on decision making and that sort of thing. Being willing to be confrontational when the need arises, when, you know, not look for a fight, but be willing to stand up and, when necessary, be the buck stops here kind of a thing. Need for a leader who promotes the K-12 curriculum development and follows through with implementation to see that it's done. In other words, we all agree we're going to do this, and then there's a follow-through to find out that there might be 2 or 3 outriders who say, this is baloney and I'm not going to do it. And you have to follow through and get people on board. The rural initiative and be creative, and then be open and embrace new technology and grant writing. And as somebody said, we didn't write it down, but, you know, think out of the box. Okay, that was those. Now, I don't know whether you want to add some to that as we talk, or how you want to do that. I'll go through these and then you decide that. Now, one of the things we ask them is, what are the strengths and the good points of the district that a new superintendent is going to need to embrace? And of course, the public school library deal, and second is a friendly and welcoming community, and 3, the longevity of the staff and the level of education. In other words, a lot of master's degrees. And 4, the size in the community. It's a small community and it's close knit. 5, you have good facilities with everything connected, elementary, high school, or close, middle school. lots of support from the community and athletics, done very well in those, and the academic achievement, and then I guess the sports program would be a double. Then in the critical needs, we need grant writing, someone who is skilled in grant writing or is able to facilitate that. So often I have school board members who tell me that one of the things we want is a grant writer. And I always have to say that grant writing is a skill, and it takes some time and concentration. And if you're a superintendent, sometimes that's hard to manage, but you can arrange to have somebody with that because there are grants out there. There absolutely are. And you're affiliated with ESDAC, they have grant writers, you can work with them. So there are ways to do that. So that was a little editorial comment there. Secondly, under critical needs, the perceived lack of focus on an academic plan to provide quality and growth in teaching methods. And then more technology in the elementary, particularly in the lower grades. Facility maintenance could be a bit improved. Be well versed in someone who's well versed in the current legislation and issues. And then there's a disconnect with non-certified staff from the rest of the staff. What they were expressing there is that there are some non-certified people who sometimes think they're treated as second-class citizens. That's something that most districts deal with and have to be mindful of. 5, sustainability. They don't want the school to go away, and or the growth of the community, and then openness to working with other rural districts. And then we have an item in which we say, well, if there are 3 candidates sitting here and you are asked to select one, they're all equal. What do you use to select? Well, this always takes a lot of thought, and nobody says anything, and then pretty soon. And people person, and that a lot of people said that was a good thing. To be approachable, which would be related to people person. And somebody said, well, I want to ask them why they think they're the best candidate. And I said, well, I think they'll probably be asked that in an interview. And then for the best interest of the students be put first. So those are all good. So I don't know whether you want to do more with this or not. And then, of course, you already have gone through on your brochure, and I'm sure you all talked about that. You have a good list there as well. So, okay.
Any questions that you wish to ask Dr. Hine at this point on what he's gathered from staff and a community member?
I think it's good.
They're good comments. They're good comments. And the nice thing, you ask people. You know, I think that's nice too. So I think it's nice.
One single characteristic that came to my mind was if I had to choose between 3 people, do you have common sense?
Well, and that would be a good one to put down there. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, sometimes that's just assumed, but not always. That's right. I agree.
Some of the things I've made note of that I'd like to see is someone who has experience in diversifying sources of school support. That could be certainly grants, but it could be other things as well. An entrepreneurial approach to problem solving. I think that kind of is consistent with this think outside the box, but someone that can be creative in figuring out a new way of doing things if something's not going as well as you'd like it to, which
You're right.
probably goes very much along with the idea of school support. put some emphasis on cultivating teacher development.
Professional development.
Yeah, and not just in the idea of what kinds of in-services are we going to do, but helping more people realize the opportunities, something like Andrea did last year in applying for master teacher recognitions or whatever else there might be. I think that not only is a good thing for our own staff development, but it's something that illustrates competence of the school to the public at large, and I think is, in that sense, almost kind of good marketing for the school.
Juliana, you wrote those down for me.
Can you repeat the first part of it? Because you were going fast enough that I didn't catch all of it.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Is actively cultivating development within the teaching staff.
No, I caught that part, the very beginning, experience.
Experience in diversifying sources of school support.
Okay.
You can just email me that, just add it on to those if you will for me, please. And then when we sit down this screen, we'll kind of have it in front of us.
Okay.
And I don't know, maybe it kind of goes without saying, and yet shows initiative.
You got the common sense piece, did you not?
Yes, I did.
When are we closing applications?
The 9th of January. I have one completed application and another is on its way. But it's early, so it's not a worry yet.
A month away is early.
Yes, it is, and they have Christmas break sometimes to put it together.
You see, there's 10 different school districts right now that are soliciting
That's right.
applications in the
I'm
state.
doing Plainville and Rollins County, I go to Buckland tomorrow night, and there'll be a heck of a lot more. So that's why, as soon as we get our applications and we meet with you, you really need to get your interview and get cracking. If you put it off, it's very common for a candidate to apply for more than in one position, and there's anything wrong with that. And so you don't want to lose somebody. I don't know, I told you this before, I have no idea how many apps you have. I hope you have 15. I just don't know. I really don't. There's no way for us to know. I think one of the districts, actually two of them that I'm looking at now to help, you have to be a principal. And that's a disadvantage when you're hiring a superintendent, because they don't want to take a job on in which they have two responsibilities. So there is that. But you don't have that.
I think there was about, that paper you gave us, it seemed like there was around 30% of the schools our size
Absolutely.
do that.
Oh, it's going all the time. In fact, I talked to a superintendent yesterday with the convention, KSB convention, and he said that his board talked with him about it. And he told him, as nicely as he could, that that would be the board's decision, but that he wouldn't be interested. So they may have to find someone else if they decide to do that. It's a district roughly your size. So that's out there. Sure is. So that's where we are. And I'd like to have about a 5 or 6 minute conversation with you in the executive session to ask you a question.
Sure. You get Dr. McCoy, please.
Other than the website, what ways are you currently publicizing the position?
Well, of course, you've already mailed out these brochures to the world, and the website. They get about 1,000 hits a month. That's really good. It's just, but as I said, the brochure is laying on the desk of every school superintendent in the state, plus all these placement offices all over. We haven't had, I think I said this to you, not very many out-of-state applicants. We'll get some Oklahoma. A couple of years ago, I placed 2 Oklahoma people, and they've just done very well. But Nebraska pays their administrators really a lot, so we don't get much from Nebraska.
And then, when Dr. Hine was finished, we'll continue on, so.
And for the entertaining motion, go into executive session for 15 minutes with Dr. Kenworthy and Dr. Hine for personnel and property acquisition.
I move we go into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss personnel and property acquisition.
Second.
Okay, moving second to go into executive session, 15 minutes for discussion of personnel and property acquisition. Dr. Kenworthy, Dr. Hine, all in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. 15 minutes.
I appreciate the opportunity. The board was supportive of me doing this. I got the opportunity to be a part of China Education Delegation, sponsored by 2 organizations. One of them is called the College Board. That is the group that the company that does the SAT test, and they do other things as well. The other organization that was involved is an agency out of China called Hanban, which is a quasi-governmental organization that is trying to promote interactions between countries and language development. My primary goal was to see what were the possibilities of us perhaps getting like a Mandarin language class to add as a possibility for choices for our kids. And we have some pretty viable options on that. One of the things I discovered was from one of the other Kansas schools that was there as a delegate, that Greenbush, which is a school staff development support organization kind of like ESDAC, offers Mandarin over the internet, and so we might be able to look at doing it that way. The other goal of the meeting was to be able to develop partnerships. We can have like sister schools and things like that with some of those in China. So.
I can't quite make that out.
Yeah.
It's in Mandarin.
Oh, is that what it is?
And you'll see this later on as well, but the character on the left, that is Mandarin for the word Hanban. And one of the things that was amazing to me, and I'll share a lot of different insights, both from just what we got to see and do, but also how their schools operate. Anyone, any American going over there could fairly reasonably navigate your way around Beijing, because just about every road sign and everything else is in Mandarin, but it's also in English. And I'll show you some of those here later on. So this is the outside of Hanban. This is the interior entrance. And you can see all the flags of the various countries that they have interactions with and programs with. So pretty interesting. China, as we hear about all the time, is a country that is growing tremendously quickly. They're able to do that because they have a lot of people, 1.3 billion people, and cheap labor. Now, that won't last forever, but in the meantime, they are just building all the time. These are all high-rise apartments that they build, usually 25 or 30 stories tall, and probably 99.9% of, well, I should say maybe not that high, 95% of people in China live in apartments. If they're in a major metropolitan area, they live in one of these apartments. We probably saw no fewer than 600 of these being built in Beijing. You have to remember, Beijing is 18 million people, so you have to have a lot of apartments. To own a house, I mean, you have to be like one of the upper elite to do that. We only saw one housing area that looked anything like what we think of as houses. Everything is just apartments. Too fast. So you can see as you're driving along, the horizon is just covered with these cranes, and every one of those cranes represents an apartment that's being built. And they make them in clusters, like this one is about 12 or 14. Sometimes they're only 8, sometimes 12. But they all have kind of a unique style or design, so they try to make them be.
I got a question, where do
Yes.
people live at now? They're building all these
Well,
apartments for?
there are some of these apartments, as you're driving along, you can see, and they're like, almost like shacks that are all around these buildings. And so, once they get the apartments done, then they raise the shacks. And I don't know what they'll do with that property, whether they turn it into parks or what. This is just a view out of the hotel window. That was when they had the Olympics, that was the big media tower that they had built. But that's not the reason I have this picture. I want you to see there's kind of a haze there. They have a tremendous pollution problem. And I'm going to show you, when we were there, we thought it was bad enough. You can kind of see it there. And so that's only, you're looking 4 or 5 blocks away, and it's getting to the point where you almost can't see past it. And here's another one. We were in two towns, Beijing, 18 million, and Tianjin, which is 12 million. It's about 80 miles away. And I'm going to switch to a different folder here, just right quick. Came across these just today. They're currently having a really bad pollution problem. This is within like the last day or two. This is in daytime, okay?
Wow. You didn't take that picture?
No, I
did
didn't take this picture. I don't think you would find outdoors if it was like this, so. And that is the sun that you see to the right of that building. And you even have, that's nighttime, some aerial shots.
Is that from the manufacturers, because of all the
Yes.
manufacturers?
Prior to the 2008 Olympics, they actually shut down all manufacturing in Beijing for one
Remember
month
that.
prior to try to get the air to
Because
come
they were
out.
embarrassed, they
Yeah.
didn't want the.
Well, the article I was reading about this, they had to cancel over 200 domestic air flights and 15 international flights because they couldn't fly into that. But they have sort of a pride issue, so they didn't describe it as smog. They said they were having heavy fog, which is why they had to cancel the flights. So. Yeah. Anyway, so back to the regular show. I'm gonna put those in here. Anyway, so pollution's a problem. Part of that is because of traffic. We had someone in our group that had been in Beijing 40 years ago and said there were not highways, there were just trails and bicycles everywhere. And you still see the bicycles, but this is what the traffic looks like on an average morning. This was just shot out in front of our bus. If you own a car, you're very fortunate because they are highly taxed to get access to the roads and for fuel and stuff like that, because they're trying to limit people's use of them. You're limited, you can only drive 4 out of 5 weekdays based upon your license tag number. If you're out on the day you're not supposed to be, you get fined. And that's to try to reduce the pollution again and get people to use mass transit. One of the curious things for me was we saw lots of bicycles. In Beijing and lots of China, bicycles and pedestrians don't have the right of way. the vehicle has the right of way. And so you're on your own. If you start to step into the street, you look real carefully to make sure nothing's coming because you're just a target. Lots of people, China in general has a huge gap socially, economically. They almost don't have a middle class. It really is lower class and then a very small upper class. And so anyone, just about anyone, they may work at some sort of business and then they have 2 or 3 other little side businesses they do to try to generate more money. Every time we came out of a building somewhere, because our bus was sitting out front, there would be 12, 15 people that are trying to sell us something. His and her Rolex watches. Someone buy some of those. They actually ran for 100 days. So. But lots of stuff like this. This is just street vendors. People come in from the surrounding countryside. All those cages, those had, I think they were some sort of little canary type bird that they were selling. So, the farm that we actually, you would think Beijing being 18 million and Tianjin being 12 million, they might just kind of blend together like going from Los Angeles to San Diego, but actually there was open country. But the remnants of the old, let's say, old communist leadership, they had lots of what they called communal farms. They're still kind of set up like that. You'll see a little series of 4 or 5 kind of huts or buildings that people live in, and then they're responsible for some small area. It's hard to see, but right here in the right foreground, they were harvesting Chinese cabbage and I can't remember what else. But the fields in the background, those are all wheat. I don't know if I have a better picture or not, but the wheat, they even still farm a lot with very primitive tools and equipment. They do it in like strips that are about 20 feet wide. And then they'll have kind of a trail, which I don't know if it's for irrigation or what. Be another 20-foot strip. But none of the fields are very big. So. But as I mentioned, bicycles. Bicycles are everywhere. They use them for all kinds of stuff that we would normally do in like a pickup truck or something. As I mentioned, they all live in apartments, and so wherever you go, there's some different style of apartment, but lots of high-rise buildings. Business, they're very much trying to be progressive, and so you'll see common businesses there. I thought maybe McDonald's was be the big one in Beijing. It's not. Kentucky Fried Chicken is. As a matter of fact, they have an extreme cultural misunderstanding. They think that all Americans do KFC for Christmas dinner. So, at Christmas time over there, for those that celebrate Christmas, they all go to KFC. So, I don't know when they're going to do that. As you can see up there in Mandarin on the left, and it says mall on the right, and up there, Capital Malls, Asia, and then in Mandarin.
Well, Tyler was in Japan and they fed him chicken for breakfast.
Oh, yes, we had, and
And it wasn't always cooked either. It was,
we had,
they had some pretty,
I don't know if they had like buffet breakfast for us, and I don't know if it was just because we're Americans and they were trying to cater to us, so this is what they always had, but breakfast buffet always had baked beans and French fries and a full salad bar. I like salad, so that was great, but French fries were fun. And they had lots of other more Asian type foods, but okay. We were wrong. We thought this was Walmart when we first saw it. So everybody took a picture of it. I think it's the Chinese knockoff of it. They actually do have Walmarts there, which we later saw. But this was different for us in that it was in a high-rise building. It was probably about an 8-story building. Basketball is becoming a huge deal over there. I don't know if it was Yao Ming, who just recently retired from the NBA. That generated some of the interest, but they now have their own kind of semi-pro basketball teams over there. But any little open spot, they'll put up a basketball goal and try to put a court in. This one surprises though, because this was inside the walls of the Forbidden City, which we've been led to believe is this sacred place. You know, you have to be very quiet when you're going through stuff like that. They have this basketball court set up, so. And they're so into basketball. I took this picture. I have to get it to our basketball coaches. That is in Mandarin and how to do a layup. All of the accompanying diagrams. So, and having watched some of the kids playing basketball, they need as much help as they can get. It's a new thing for them. So, when you have 1.3 billion people in your country, you have lots of people to throw at jobs. Every place where there was an open piece of land was like this. I mean, incredibly landscaped, just gorgeous. And it's because they have tons of people to go out there and do it. This is like a waterway down the side of a highway. When we drove from Beijing to Tianjin, 80 miles, there were only probably 4 or 5 miles where I actually got a clear shot to take a picture of the fields, because the entire way along they had planted all different types of trees. And you can see they're intentionally planted because they're all in rows, at same spacing and things like that. So they landscape everything.
Are those houses,
Oh,
sometimes
sorry.
the shack behind the,
Yes,
Okay.
remember I told you they're kind of like communal farms? Yeah. And again, the English language thing, even the National Museum of China. And they do pretty well with some of it. You know, they can make the translation. Road signs, like I said, it's kind of hard to read. It says ahead, exit. The translation doesn't always work though, if they're not very good at it. Okay. Do not slapstick chase in the library. Now,
I love these movies.
that may sort of made some sense had it been in a library, but this was in the swimming pool area. So we just sort of thought, no horsing around in school is what it basically translated to. So, and I didn't get the rest of I can't remember what the other one was, so. But that was kind of fun to see those things. To give you some idea, in the United States there's 24,000 kids taking Mandarin. In China, there are 2 million students learning English. So, it's a little different, and part of it's because of just the scale of the population. So, this was our guide. We were called Tianjin 1, because as I said, the whole group, there's about 450 of us. We were divided up into small groups of about 30 that then went out to different provinces. So there were 2 groups that went to Tianjin. So there was Tianjin 1 and Tianjin 2. Somebody went to Sichuan, somebody went to Jilin, and just all these different provinces and saw different things. We were fortunate in that we could just drive on the bus to get to our site. Some were far enough away they actually had to fly. And I guess flying on Chinese domestic airlines is an interesting experience. So, this young man was a lot of fun, but he told us some of the downsides of some of the policies in China, because China's had this one-child policy in the metropolitan areas. It hasn't been upheld in the rural areas as much, but so because they want to be able to hand down their property and stuff, they can only do that to a male child. So they have an extremely high abortion rate in trying to get these males. Well, now they're out of whack by like 10%. And so if you're a guy looking for a wife, you better have a great job, already have a car, be willing to buy her a diamond, all this kind of stuff. He was saying most Chinese males figure if they can find a wife, it won't be until they get into their mid-30s, because it takes them that long to earn enough money to get all the things that would make them attractive. So, and they too also, I mean, this is his primary job is helping do tours and stuff, but he has 2 or 3 little side businesses that he does as well. So, this was our delegation that went to Tianjin. We were on Tiananmen Square. I'm the funny one on the left with the hat, or one of the hats. Tiananmen Square was kind of amazing. It's about the size of 4 city blocks, all paved. They said it will hold 1 million people, and they've had that many people on it at different times. At one end of it is the Mausoleum Museum of Chairman Mao. And through our history studies, we think of Chairman Mao as being kind of this bad person. They still revere him. He's on their money. I don't know if you get to see it here. You can see all those umbrellas in the background. There were probably conservatively 40 to 50,000 people lined up in this huge line to get in to see him lying in state, even though it was a cold, rainy day. And so, this is called Tenement Tower. I guess they call it a tower because that's what those kind of structures are, but it's different from what we think of as being a tower. But this is where Chairman Mao in particular would make speeches from that upper ledge. And all along the front, there were these bleacher kind of things where people and officials would sit so the military would come by and do their presentations. This is also the entrance to the Forbidden City. Forbidden City has 9,999 and a half rooms, is what they told us. In their culture, 10,000 is considered to be heavenly. And so this was just short of heaven, I guess, is what they were trying to aspire to. But it really was this huge, complex city. Not a single tree in it except in one little location, which was kind of a garden for the emperor and his kids. They were just paranoid that somebody was going to get in and get the emperor. The outside walls are 30 feet tall. No trees for anybody to hide in. You can see the walkway out there between these steps and stuff. Supposedly, we were told it's 8 feet thick with those pavers, so that nobody could tumble in underneath. And it seemed kind of strange because we see all these Chinese people coming through, and yet we figured out it's kind of like the equivalent of us as Americans going to Washington, D.C. and we do tours and stuff. China's so big that we have people that have never been there. We also got to go to the Great Wall. We did all of the stuff in one day. It was just a whirlwind tourist day. And we actually, there was about 24 of us that got really crazy and we went all the way to the top. There are sections of it that are more level and rolling, which is kind of like taking a leashless stroll, but we took the hard side and it was stairs almost all the way up. Some of the stairs were like 3 inches, some of them were like 15 inches, because they built the steps to match the terrain, not to match what people walk as. So. We also got to go to the Lama Temple. It's the biggest Buddhist temple in Beijing, and real interesting. I mean, it's kind of their equivalent of church, so you have to pay admission to get in, and have the little Buddhist store in there that you can visit on the way out. And so, lots of Tibetan monks that still are there. This was kind of an interesting, Tianjin, you know, how cities all like to have something that marks them. It's their thing. This is Tianjin's. This is the world's largest Ferris wheel on a bridge. They couldn't make the world's largest Ferris wheel, but they thought, well, if we put it on a bridge, that'll get us in. So, if you've ever been to Chicago's Navy Pier, it's very comparable to that. It takes 34 minutes to make one revolution. We didn't get to go in here, but just went by. That's the bird's nest from the 2008 Olympics. The food that we got to experience, it was always very elegant looking. Always had this glass Lazy Susan thing in the middle because everything was sort of family style. And so you just kind of moved around. If you saw something you liked, you grabbed it. So. And that was the menu for one of the places we met. Bamboo pith. I think I ever had bamboo pith. This wasn't too bad. This was kind of one of our calmer, tamer menus. These are the appetizers. I got kind of going clockwise. The bottom black one is some kind of fungus mushroom kind of thing. It's really chewy. The thing on the right is lotus root, which is a water plant. Tastes pretty much like raw potato. A different type of lotus root wrapped in ham, and then a sardine, and I don't know, I can't BOE120511, but we tried it all. This is just an example showing how stuff is served. We also had sea cucumber, which is kind of like bland calamari, is the best way I can describe it. You don't eat the prickly things on the outside, just what's inside. And many times we were served some type of chicken, and it always had the head, and it was like this honor to be given the head to eat. So, there's not a whole lot on the chicken head to eat, I can tell you that.
How do they taste?
Not great.
Doesn't look like a chicken.
It's starting to get into the school side now. We went through about 7 different schools. It's where we spent the majority of our time. Almost all the schools, I think all the schools we went to, the kids wore uniforms, which was interesting. They're basically like a windsuit. The kids had regular street clothes underneath and then windsuits. And in some situations, they even had on coats, which we thought was odd, until we found out that they have like a state law or regulation or something. Schools can't turn on the heat until November 15th. So everywhere we went, it was cold. China is a 5,000-year-old culture, and they really promote their culture. From grade school all the way up to high school, they do calligraphy like this. They practice it over and over again. One of the things that was interesting is, I hadn't really realized, is there are provincial or regional fonts. If you look at the two things, they're both writing exactly the same thing, but they're using different fonts. Like one might be a Szechuan font, and the other one might be a Tianjin font. So they look different, but those characters say the same thing. So. They also promote kids through fans, decorative fans, opera masks. Like I said, this is all cultural stuff that they do throughout their school years. In the elementary, for example, they'll do your basic folding and cutting a snowflake out. But by the time you get to high school, it develops into this. We saw one kid who did these. He is nationally recognized for this type of artwork in China. It's so highly valued. He only goes to like 3 or 4 classes a day, and then he has his own office. And it's bigger than any office I've been around, where he goes in and that's all he does the rest of the day, is this type of stuff. As I said, we visited elementaries, we visited middle schools, we visited high schools, we even visited a college, visited the Beijing Foreign Studies University. At every building, there were armed guards at the doors. Not because they have problems or anything. They've got enough people, they've got to have jobs for people, so they put armed guards at the entrance to every building. Every campus was surrounded by high fences and walls and things like that. We didn't go to a single school that had fewer than 3,000 students, whether it's elementary, middle school, high school, whatever it was, at least 3. Some of them are like 3,600, 3,800. Class sizes, 40 to 50 with one teacher. There were smaller ones, but in general, that was kind of the size. But this is an elementary band. It was kind of interesting to listen to them. They made up in volume what they lacked in skill. We could hear them way before we got even close, so they were enthusiastic. We were always welcomed to the school in English. This was at, as I mentioned, the Beijing Foreign Studies University. And they make it a huge deal. I mean, I don't know if I've ever been to a convention where they put this much into the stage preparation, let alone to the speeches and all this. Everything is just a huge, big event for them. This is one of the choirs. This was at Tianjin 1 high school. They all have numbers. At some point in the past, those numbers represented their rank, that they don't anymore. Just absolutely gorgeous sounding choir. But also, I did kind of a quick head count and figured out it's only about 1/10% of their entire school, because the school is huge. So, yeah, if we had that many kids, we could probably come up with this fantastic choir like that. This shows the campus at Tianjin One School, multiple buildings and all kind of wrapped around the sports stuff. Big courtyard. This was going into Beijing Royal School. This was the only place that we saw regular, what I call residential houses. Some billionaire businessman decided he wanted to build a school, and then he built regular American-style split-level houses that wrapped all around the perimeter of the school. And so for your kid to attend there, you have to be a pretty high-up ranking businessman or something like making a lot of money, because it costs a lot, one, to buy the house, and then to be able to send your kid here. And their uniform really actually was like sweatsuits. Just another one of the high schools. Like I said, everything goes up.
What's their length of school day?
Like their school day. That's an interesting question. They start at 7:30 in the morning, they go until 11, and this is pretty much standard around the places we went. 7:30 in the morning, go to 11:30, then they have 2 hours off for lunch. And at the high school anyway, they just cut the kids loose. And I mean, we would see them as we were driving through the streets. You could recognize the high school kids in their uniforms, going from place to place downtown. But then classes would start back up again. Goes at 1:30 and it would go until 6. I think all the schools we saw were all considered to be elite schools. You have to test them to get into them. They test kids all the time. And where you get to go to high school is based on how well you test when you're at junior high. And China many times does very well on international math and science tests. One of the reasons is because they're testing these kids at high school. Kids, if they don't test well coming out of junior high, a lot of them just drop out of school. Vocational or hour jobs or something like that. So the kids that are getting tested are kind of the elite kids. We never got to see what I would consider to be just a plain average kid in a plain average school.
So are these boarding schools?
Yes. These kids all stay there. So they go to class until 6, then they go to dinner, then go back to their dorm room and study until 11 or 12, and then start the whole thing over the next day. So. And they're really structured pretty similar in terms of grades. Like they had elementary that went up through 6th grade, then they had junior high, middle school, 7th and 8th grade, and high school. A few of the high schools were 10, 11, 12, and their middle school were 7, 8, 9. But the one difference is their kindergartens are completely separate buildings, nowhere near the other buildings. They're just completely pulled apart and all that.
What about their school year? When do they start, or do they go all year?
I don't know that we ever asked that question. Let's see if I can find out. This was PE time, which was interesting. Just seeing all the uniforms. And they all go out there and they can do different things, like play basketball or soccer or something like that. But at some point, someone blows a whistle and they all line up in lines and they do kind of like what I call aerobics. All together. They stretch together and they do kind of a dance routine sort of stuff. And if you remember the 2008 Olympics at the opening, they had all these kids out in the middle of the field and they were all doing this routine. And we were all standing there watching this and it's like, well, sure, it's easy to train. And they've been doing it for a whole year. They just do the same routine over and over. This was not the biggest one we saw. I have a video clip. I don't know if I'll want to take time to show it tonight, but 2,000 kids standing on the soccer field, all doing the same thing at the same time. Same uniform. It was pretty interesting. Kind of an average looking classroom. Like I said, it's set up for 50 kids. We didn't always have that many, but pretty big classrooms. This was a theater arts class. This was at the Lahey Foreign Studies High School. And they actually have kids come in from Korea and Japan, and that's where most of them come from, to help to study China and Chinese there. They had about 3,500 students, and they had a faculty of about 250. This was the faculty lunchroom. Even faculty, most of them live on campus. They have dorms for the faculty. So they pay for their food and their apartment, things like that. Teachers in China make about $800 American a month. So, doesn't sound like a lot, but they get a lot of other things covered in the process. And their classes are set up sort of like block schedules. So like if a teacher has 3 classes one day and 4 the next, on the day when they have 3, once they get down to teaching the third one, they're out of there. This is my last slide. This was at the closing banquet that we had at the Beijing Royal School. This is Katrina, and they had one of the students sit at each table so we could kind of pose them questions. Obviously, this was a very, very elite school, and we asked her, we said, so what are you going to do when you get out of high school? She was a senior. And she said, well, I'd like to go to one of the prestigious schools in China. She said, but my grades aren't good enough. And she said, I'm probably going to end up going to the United Kingdom, to Great Britain, to go to school. So just always high stakes for these kids. And yet, they still are just kids. They laughed and ran around and did a lot of fun. So, the kind of closing piece, as I said, is made some partnerships with some Kansas schools, and so we'll be having some conversations with them and starting to look at, is it feasible? Talking to Mr. Bergen about scheduling stuff to see if we had some kids that had interest, if we were to set it up with kind of an internet-based program for kids to do Mandarin. It's becoming a much greater demand language for kids to learn in light of all the business and stuff that's going on between the 2 countries. So, the group that the Tianjin 1 and Tianjin 2 groups, they had us set up regionally. So we were all from Missouri, Nebraska, Kansas, Dakotas, Wisconsin, Minnesota, from kind of central United States. So, questions that you have?
Do they sound very interested in coming here for exchange opportunities?
They do. One of the opportunities that we could also perhaps pursue, we probably have to do it in conjunction with some districts around us, is they actually have teacher exchange programs, where if you don't want to do it kind of on an internet basis, you can actually, they'll send a teacher over and you hire them to teach Mandarin. But we'd obviously have to share it, so we're not going to have those sections for the teacher. But, and then we got information from a couple of the high schools as far as doing like student exchange stuff, so we can think about it as well. So, and I don't know if you can see it in the background of this picture. This was in their gymnasium. They had, I don't know, they must have spent weeks doing this. They had the flags of all the countries that they work with, and the flags of every state in the United States are up there. You can't see it very well, but Kansas is like the 5th one from the end down there. So, they put lots of resources into their schools, at least into the elite schools. Like I said, we didn't actually get to see one of the more regular schools. But everything is driven from the national level down. I mean, it's all standardized, how everything is. Curriculum, everything. So, in terms of how they run schools, I don't know that we want to try to imitate a lot of that, but the partnerships and stuff like that, as far as exchanges, I think have some real potential. So, any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Kenworthy, for sharing that. Sure, if you have questions, he would entertain those anytime that you want.
Well, lots more pictures.
On to our next item of business, which is high school work release request.
every December, we have students that we know are going to, that will have met their requirements for graduation, who might want to work part of the day. And so, I'll let Mr. Bergen talk a little bit more about that there.
Yeah, there's 5 students that have asked about and applied for the work release, which would start when we come back on January 4th. I have letters from people that employ them, their parents, and them. Some of them would be leaving after 4th hour, and some would leave after 5th hour.
And
You could just, yeah, pardon?
And you'd recommend all of these?
Yes, I recommend all, the group check, and they all are on course to graduate. And I checked with Mrs. Hacker to make sure their credits were all in place. And it just tells you their names and where they're going to work and who they're working for.
Mr. President, I move the board approve the list of students for the second semester work release program as listed.
Second.
Been moved and second to approve the list of students for second semester work release as presented. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried.
Do you need those back, Mr. Bergen?
Yeah, we just put no money.
All right. And so that takes us to communications this time.
Thank you very much.
Board member activities and reports. And we'll start with you today. Chad, do you have anything?
I have nothing to report.
Cool.
And you, Mr. Gardner?
I attended partially attended the program over at Stafford with the Plains all the schools and 114 representative districts. And I have some handouts. I don't know, basically, they talked about the governor's new plan, which they don't know anything about, because the governor doesn't know anything about it, I don't think. Or he hasn't told anyone about it yet. These are the handouts that they passed out, if you guys want to look at them or anything.
I did run off some of the ones you can grab one as they come around. I did not make copies of this. I think if you like, you can get additional copies of this, so.
I don't think I have anything else to add.
Okay.
Well, I attended the school finance at the Farm Bureau meeting, if that counts, and that's kind of what they did there. We really didn't have anything, nothing in cement, and they couldn't really tell you anything. A lot of what ifs and what might be, but nothing concrete.
I also attended the meeting, and they had an exercise where they had the school districts each try to articulate what they were most concerned about or valued, and I think the first one was just the idea of holding harmless the districts in terms of funding. I don't know that it's real clear on what the objective is for the finance formula, because if you're starting, you have this finite pie, you're not increasing funding to anyone. I'm not really saving funding to the state either, so there's the political dilemma, I guess. Anyway.
Stan?
I'll be quiet.
I also attended a meeting at Stafford that we had with Representative Mitch Holmes. And the only thing I can say is that seems to be a kind of a catchphrase to be an advocate for public education in the sense of how valuable is that to us here in this community. In other words, how much do we value that? And I think the more that you, the
community really has high stakes value in public education, then that would tell you that you need to really be a strong advocate for it. Because otherwise, it may be the case that if your community doesn't value it, then you might be swallowed up by another larger area. I think a lot of it ties to does the community really want to buy into the idea of small rural America, or do they want to be swallowed up by the large corporate America? If you can kind of think of it that way, because it seems like the larger the school districts, the more pull that you have into getting resources. And so when you start thinking about being an advocate, you need to be thinking about why education was so important for you and what values you got from having a rural education. And I think that's the main emphasis that we talked about, and how to promote that within our community. That's all I have, so we're ready for administrative reports. We'll start with elementary.
Yes, and I believe to put,
Messed it up.
oh, okay,
Sorry.
okay, sorry.
She sent it to me, I was supposed to have it on your desktop, and I didn't get it there.
That's all right. It's gonna save a little paper, but you'll just get to listen to
I'll
it.
send it to you later.
That's fine. Preschool 24, my K4 total is 103, and my K6 total is 151. Had a family move and some other children in a couple of families not in their homes right now, so we're expecting maybe some of those to come back at some point. 5th and 6th grade winter concert was well attended. Several classes have taken or will be taking field trips, and very appreciative to PTO funding. Those have been requested and granted from PTO. We've also been using some of the funding from our box tops for education, so again, we're very appreciative of people who put those box tops and get them to us. It does add up, and we're using that funding to do some neat things with our kids. Our nurse, Lisa Cornwell, has been working diligently to digitize or computerize the nurse's office, and she's reported that that is almost complete. So if it's not complete within the next week or two, it will be, she said, by the time we're back in January, so, which is, it's been wonderful for us, so, that's what I've got.
Good. Mr. Berger?
The enrollment has been pretty consistent where we started. We had a student move in after the 20th, and we have another student that's 7th grader that attends learning center, the day school and practice. We mentioned, but we had a quiz bowl meet hosted our one we host last Monday evening or afternoon. The junior high students band and vocal performed last Tuesday evening. Did a good job. Jacob and Chloe Clark performed in the Southwest District Honor Band in Dodge City. Kind of cool. We had some junior high students do that the month before, and high school students. We weren't sure about how that was going to turn out, depending on how the weather was going to be on Saturday morning, but it turned out to be okay to go to Dodge. The CPL meeting, we have every other month we have a CPL meeting, and last month I just mentioned about the thing about 1A schools and the petition going around about changing 1A back to one division. So I'm sure that'll be talked about at the league meeting and see what kind of ideas the other league schools and how many of those league schools and how they sent that petition back. Because we haven't met since that time. So I'll get more information, just an FYI, it's urgent. High school basketball games, as you all know, is underway. And we have a student activity account. Is that your Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly?
The other thing I have kind of ties back into the presentation that several board members went to last Tuesday at Stafford on the governor's school finance proposal. There are a lot of details about it that are still unknown. It has been presented at the KESB regional meetings, just kind of in generalities. There are things that cause school people to be kind of uneasy because they're unknown at this point. We have yet to see what will transpire. One kind of parallel issue to that is the governor and his administration have been talking about trying to reduce or eliminate Kansas corporate and personal income tax. And that's just a goal, it has to go through all kinds of processes, but just to give you some sense of what that could be like, if all personal income tax was eliminated, and the state was to make up that amount, which is about $3 billion, in sales tax, the sales tax would have to go from 6.3% to 15.3%. If it were to be made up in property tax, the mill rate would have to increase by 100 mills from what it currently is to make up $3 billion. So as I said, it'll be interesting to see what gets proposed and how they're talking about. Are they going to make further budget cuts to try to address some of that? Are they going to try to keep the revenue stable somehow? Those are all questions that will be interesting to see as the legislative session starts. That's all I have.
Alrighty. Yes, we have a couple other items. Business items.
Mr. President, I would entertain a motion for the hiring of Kurt Fairchild as part-time junior high girls basketball coach, and for Ivan Owens as elementary custodian.
Mr. President, I so move.
Second. Been moved and seconded to offer part-time contract to Kurt Fairchild for junior high girls basketball and elementary custodian to Ivan Williams.
Owens.
Ivan Williams.
You're a few years behind.
Where did that come from?
No.
He was your coach, wasn't he?
That's my coach. That's from a couple years ago.
He'd like the custodial job. We
I
can
bet
get in
he
touch
would.
with him, so.
All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. 7-0. Thank you very much. And then, is there future agenda items we need?
No, but I just remind the board that I will be sending you documents from the Teachers Association. It'll probably be a day or two. I'll put a cover letter on it, so it'll be days.
I would remind you that in January, interview process, the lockout that week that we talked about earlier.
Is it the 9th?
The week of the 9th.
9. Any activities that you had, I don't know what dates will be, but I would let you know in advance that.
And you may even want to look a couple of days the following week, because we happen to have bad weather of some type that cancels something and we'll have to reschedule stuff.
And so does that mean the first week before the 9th is
No.
when we would do any kind of site visits?
You can't do anything before the 9th, because that's the deadline of anything, so
Okay.
everything will
Site
occur after
visits
that.
would probably come after this sequence that you use.
Good questions.
Those will be in the.
Yeah, well, no, usually site visits are done during
On
the day.
the-
Oh,
on
the
the-
interviews in the evening, yes. The whole process, it'll be a significant part of the day, because there'll be a time usually for candidates to meet with district office staff and superintendent, to meet with all of the district staff. There's a kind of a social sort of meet and greet thing, and also for community, and then with the board and